I'm going to talk about something completely different today, and that is the workforce in about 10 years, and it's a relatively softball subject. If you look around the room, if you look to your left and to your right, most people, most of the time, don't think about the people they work with today and how those people are going to look in about 10 years, or the people that I am working with now, how many of them am I going to continue to be working with in 10 years, or how many of them may be retired, or who is in school now that I'll be working with in 10. The good news is 10 years is a really small event horizon to work from. If this was like a 50-year talk, it'd be a heck of a lot harder to talk about. But 10 years is pretty straightforward. I had some really good help this morning. I got up about 7 o'clock. Everybody else was asleep in the house. I went and sat in my big comfy chair, flipped open my laptop, started reading my feeds, and my daughter came downstairs, my eldest, Emma. And Emma's 8 years old. She was born on the same day as the iPod. And she... And you think iPods are so old. She's my Emma Classic. And she goes, "What are you doing, Dad?" And I said, "I'm giving a talk about the next 10 years in innovation, stuff like that." And she goes, "Oh, that's easy." And she started rattling stuff off, and I said, "You got to write this down, because I got to tell everybody what you're saying." And yes, I'm one of those dads that just brags on their kids. Different looking plants, new food and fancier foods than we have now, fancier clothes, flying cars. And by the way, that was the 5th thing she wrote down, but it was the first thing she said was flying cars. And I know that everybody in here, when they were her age, and somebody said, "What's going to happen in 10 years or 20 years or 50 years, said flying cars. You can't lie. All of us said that. And she's never seen, she didn't even know what the Jetsons are. New species of creatures, blue monkeys, I mean, just all sorts of stuff. Laugh now, because she's going to be your boss in about 10 years. But if you think about, and there's a great TED talk if you do the TED videos on your iPads or iPhones. There was a kid, and I think she must have been probably somewhere between 11 and 13, saying, think about the imagination of a child, and think about all the things they don't know they can't do yet. Hold on to that for a minute, because as John said, you have this generation of digital natives that are coming up through the educational system right now and are going to be joining the workforce by about 2020. And at the same time, whoops, let's see if infrared actually works line of sight, not Bluetooth. There we go. That's what was handy. At the same time, you have unprecedented in the stream of human history a demographic bulge of baby boomers that are 78 million people or so, that because of things like improvements in healthcare and less epidemics, the last influenza pandemic was a rounding error compared to previous ones. No really big worldwide wars to sort of attrit out a large portion of the population. You have this large population bulge called the baby boomers, and then a smaller one called the Xers, or the Echos. Then you have the Ys and so forth. You have this large group of people that are living longer and have these great degrees in science and engineering. I think we've all heard the stories about NASA between 2000 and 2010, and how many people retired from NASA that NASA was not able to backfill domestically because the degrees just did not exist in the workforce. That education did not exist anymore domestically. So there were challenges. You have those folks, the boomers, and thankfully, well, we'll talk about it in a moment. You have those folks and these digital natives that are coming up through the educational system right now that for the first time in history are going to be in the workforce at the exact same time. So we're going to have some interesting generational and cultural problems as well as communication problems, and those are going to be compounded by technology in some ways, and I'm going to talk about that. Just briefly, there are about, 6.8 billion people on the planet right now, and we're going to add about 100 million people a year over the next 10 years. So we're going to have about 7.8 billion by 2020. That's not for every one person coming in, or one person going out, one person comes in. The places that people are reproducing are different now than they used to be historically. So that billion people, 56% of those are going to be coming from Asia. 4% of those are going to be coming from the United States. So just keep that in mind when we say, oh, we're going to be creating all these jobs here domestically and so forth, and we'll have lots of people to fill them. That won't necessarily be the case. And we will be creating a lot more jobs, and a lot of that will be from replacement, but some of that will be organic job growth. But there will be some opportunities, and there'll also be some challenges that arise out of these extra folks. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment when we talk about dependency ratios. Generations. I mentioned a moment ago about baby boomers and talked about Xers and Generation Y, or millennials. And then there's new millennials, people born sort of since the turn of the millennia. if you draw these out, the Census Bureau does something called demographic pyramids, population pyramids, and they show sort of these gaps and bulges and things like that on what age groups have the most people in a given country or across the world. And if you look at the Western world, if you look at places like Germany and Japan, the median age there is the same age as Florida. It's pretty old. The Western world is aging at a very, very quick rate. Sorry, at a normal rate, but demographically from a bulge perspective, it's considerably older than if you look at the rest of the world. The developing world is considerably younger. So when we talk about the people that are coming up through the workforce, we have some of the population locally, but we're also going to be using a lot of population internationally, primarily because we're not going to have access to people. And there's going to be some benefits actually in some international areas in the degrees that these people are pursuing today outside of the country that we'll need moving forward. But if you just do a simple subtraction, you end up with some extra jobs. If you look at the screen, there's going to be more jobs, or there's, what did the economists call it? It was either total or perfect employment, where as many jobs and as many people. And you're going to get to the point, unlike today, where the workers actually get to dictate to the employers, these are the terms by which I'll come work for you. Because quite frankly, you need the job filled. And I'm going to get to that. Actually, I'm going to do that right now. If I am 65 years old, which is not going to be too far off in about 10 years, and I have got a degree in some particular esoterica. I used to work with a guy at Baxter Healthcare that had 2 PhDs in pyrolytic carbon. And there ain't a whole lot of him bouncing around. So if I needed the pyrolytic carbon guy, I'm pretty much going to have to take the terms that he offers me. And if he decides to tell me that 8 months of the year he's working from New Mexico, guess what? I got a telecommuter. I don't really have a whole lot of leeway. Well, I haven't seen lights like this since the last time I got pulled over. Honestly, officer, I didn't go to the KISS concert. Completely derailed my train of thought. We're going to have some challenges. I think I've kind of made that clear. I mentioned about the people coming in, the extra billion people, and anybody who has gone through primary school in Van Meter or elsewhere knows that that won't really matter to the workforce because there are going to be 10. The problem is that the people working actually need to support them. And the baby boomers who decided to retire, and by the way, in case anybody started wondering, they get full retirement benefits, they being the boomers, because I'm an Xer, so I have to speak about they. The boomers actually start to get full retirement benefits starting next year. So if you took that big bulge and made a bell curve out of it, and you said, here are the people that are the oldest of the boomers, they hit Social Security full benefit 65 next year. So it's the beginning. Does anybody here surf? In Iowa. What am I asking? Okay, we got one. Okay, so imagine if you would, you're laying on the ground. And you're laying on your board and you're watching the swells come in. And you're trying to figure out where the next wave's going to be. Okay, which one of these am I going to ride? Because they're all waves, but some waves are made better than others. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for that particular wave to come in that is really worth me popping off the board, paddling like hell, exhausting my upper body. You have this bulge of workers. You have a bunch of kids coming in, 100 million kids a year coming into the work, or coming into the population. At the same time, you have people who are deciding to telecommute 8 months of the year from New Mexico. If they decide to work at all, and we really want them to work because we need their skills, and quite frankly, we have more jobs than we have people in about 10 years, so you really need these folks in the workforce. But those that do decide to take retirement and are staying at home and they're golfing or whatever retired folks are doing these days, those folks, we start talking about things called dependency ratios, which is the percentage of people that are working in a workforce versus people that are not working either because they're too young or they choose not to or they're too old or whatever the case may be. In the United States today, that number is about 20%. So for every 5 people working, you get 1 that's not. If you have, in China, for example, that's 40%. In the United States, by 2035, it'll be 3 to 1. And by 2075, it'll be completely even. Now, you don't have to be a mathematician or a tax expert to know what kind of drag that creates macroeconomically on the workforce if I'm working and 1/3 of what I'm working for is supporting somebody that's not working. So we're going to have some challenges there. So it's really in everybody's best interest to keep as many people as possible in the workforce. And obviously you can't speed up the kids going through Van Meter and say they're going to start working at 5 or start working at 10. But what you can do is you can take the boomers and you can give them a lot more incentives and a lot more flexibility in the type of work that they do. Which leads to my next slide, is back to telecommuting and teleworking. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm a technologist at heart. We talked about disruptive technology. This is where I usually spend most of my time, not in demographic curves and pandemics and things like that. But I do think long and hard about what are the big macro changes that are going to be happening globally, because those are always really good portents of technology change to come. So for example, everybody in here knows, I would assume, that when you have an aging population, obviously, guess what the largest demand for jobs is going to be over the next 10 years? Any guesses? Healthcare. Healthcare. Bingo, nailed it. Healthcare and healthcare-related industries. What's second?
Retirement homes.
Retirement homes, yeah, construction of retirement homes. It's actually analytic-heavy professions like finance and IT. Science and engineering, still heavy demand, but not growing as fast as healthcare. So you have these folks, they're working from home, or they're working from wherever they like. And you have, once again, for the first time in history, people that are maybe 20 or 25, maybe 65, 70, older, in the workforce at the same time. Probably, and how many of you in here today telecommute? Raise your hand. Or work from home or work in alternate places? Everybody, okay, pretty much. How many people in here use Skype and Skype video? All right, here's another Emma story. I'm going to redeem myself for my lack of push-up here a moment ago. So I went to go speak at the Serious Virtual Worlds Conference in England. And every day I'm on the road, 5 minutes, hi, nice to see you too. Every time I'm in England or every time I travel, since my children were born, I video conference with them every night that I'm away. This one particular night, I'm in a hurry, I'm with a couple other people, we're going to run out to the pub and get some beers. And I flip open my phone and see, that's how long ago it was, I flipped open my phone. And I give my kids a call, I give Emma a call. And Emma says, what are you doing? And I said, well, I wanted to call and catch you before I went out for the night because I'm ahead of you time-wise. And she says, I don't want to talk to you on the phone, I want to talk to you on the computer. Click. And I'm standing in the taxi line, looking at my phone going, she just hung up on me. And what she meant was, I don't want to hear you, I want to see you and hear you. And to go back in the conference, open up my laptop, fire up iChat, and we had a nice little flat daddy video conference. You have her on one end, the digital natives, as John said, and then you have people, the digital immigrants on the other side, and both of my folks are very technologically adept, but the first time I did show them video conferencing, it was somewhere between novelty and witchcraft. They're still coming to terms with all of that. And so these are the folks that you have, and my folks are not that far out of the upper end of that workforce that I talked about. Is from an age curve perspective. You have these folks in the workforce at the same time. Okay, I'm going to put them in the same office, in my office in Capitol Square. Okay, there's going to be some challenges, there's going to be lots of disagreements because of cultural, tools, perspectives, things like that, expectations, meritocracies versus no, you need to earn it on your way up and you need to go through the whole cursus honorum of being a manager and then a senior manager and all that sort of thing, that whole spanking machine. Until you get to, now all of a sudden these people are working, one of them's working from Java Joe's, the other one's working from New Mexico. And now you've missed all the nonverbal cues that people have for each other to say, no, you're making me upset. I could tell, or you can tell by the way my brow's furrowing that you're making me upset, so I'm going to back off and I'm going to downshift my style because I know that now our collaboration is going downhill and it's starting to turn into hostility. So I'm actually going to back off and I'm going to read the social cues and all the things that humans have thousands of years of opportunity or to accumulate. I'm able to downshift that in person. I'm not able to do that necessarily over Skype. Definitely not able to do it via blog or Twitter or Google Wave or anything like that. So you have technology, as much as I'd love to say technology to the rescue, because that's obviously what I've been selling for the last 20 plus years, it isn't. Technology is going to help. We're building lots of great tools today around building social fabric, about building trust. But at the end of the day, human beings work best face-to-face, and we're not going to be face-to-face because the new workers coming in are not used to it. They're used to being at Java Joe's or Caribou or wherever else. And the older workers are going to be saying, hey, it's wintertime. I'm not going to be in Iowa. I'm going to be someplace warmer. So we have some challenges there. And it's going to be something that we're going to need to wrestle with and create new tools between now and then to address how do you keep that trust. I had a great boss at a large technology company I used to work for, and he had a global workforce. He had a distributed team just like I did. And what he used to do is he would schedule hallway time. And does anyone know what hallway time is? Okay. Hallway time is when you're walking down the hall and you bump into somebody you work with and you stop and you have a conversation, and that sort of catalyzes where you go for the rest of your life. Or a multi-billion-dollar acquisition at this company that I was at. A lot of those came out of the lunch line, actually, because the lunch lines were so long. And what we'd do is he'd schedule the time and say, I just want to sit down and talk about nothing. What TV shows are you watching these days? What do you like to do? And we'd have those conversations to build trust. It wasn't an explicit interaction. It was an implicit one, explicitly scheduled. Because when it comes down to it, society is built on serendipity. And it's about bumping into somebody at the water cooler or the coffee shop or in the hallway. And you have these little informal interactions, and that's how you build trust, and that's the healthy foundation by which all of our working relationships are built on. So when you have that meeting at 8 o'clock Monday morning, and everybody's in there going, oh, I don't want to be here, they look around the table, but they trust all these people, usually, depending on the level of dysfunction. They trust all the people that they're in the room with, because you've built up all this fabric, the societal fabric. You know how hard that is to do if the only time you see this person who doesn't look a thing like you because he's 60 years younger or 60 years older is over Skype? Or occasionally, asymmetrically, you see his avatar on a wave or something like that? It's a lot harder. So we have a lot of opportunity to create new tools. As another printing press moment. We have a Cambrian explosion of tools that we've been building in the last 10 years. We need to exponentially grow that again and build even more tools to facilitate this trust. Oh, self-employed. This is what the Census Bureau calls it. It's people who don't have a square job. Is anybody in here familiar with Tom Malone? I got how many? None? Oh, that's it. Oh, boy. Okay. Tom Malone, yeah, it does. Time flies. Tom Malone wrote a great book called The Future of Work, and he describes something in there called Hollywood style of work, which is you have people who have particular skill sets that gravitate towards projects, do the project, and then move on to the next thing. I have 20% of my workforce at my company is like this. I hired the best people I could in the industry for as much time as I could afford them. They're not full-time employees at my company, but they're the best at what they do. They're called self-employed, according to the census. I already mentioned we need to do more things in science and engineering. 5% of US students are pursuing science and engineering degrees as of the last time somebody checked, which was about the 2000 class. It was something like 56% of all kids, I don't know what the number is in Van Meter, something like 56% of all kids were going for college degrees after high school at that point in time, compared to 40-some% back in 1970. So that number's up, people going to college, but they're going for degrees in things that they're getting degrees in things that we're not attriting out of the workforce on the other side. So we need to get more folks now in the next 10 years heavily in science and engineering, because that's what we're going to be losing for folks who decide not to work in the future. So we're going to have a diverse workforce. We're going to have of lots of ages, lots of cultural differences, immigrants and natives on the digital side. We're going to have technologies that both help and hinder what's going on. And we're going to have skills gaps in science and engineering and other disciplines that we're going to need to fill. And then we're obviously going to have entitlement programs, pensions, 401ks. Now, sorry, we had a recession. 101ks that are going to cause people to want to work longer. But it also, the people who are learning science and engineering today aren't necessarily have the same skill set that people are in science and engineering when we were doing moon landings. So there's still going to be translational error there that we need to address for.